The subject of our debate this morning is New World Order after Ukrainian crisis, 25 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think it's one of the best subjects to discuss in this forum. We have excellent speakers this morning. Sorin Ducaru, who is Assistant Secretary General for Emergency Security Challenges, NATO. Mikhail Darkashvili, Deputy Defense Minister of Georgia. Good morning. Hanna Shelest, she's Senior Researcher of National Institute for Strategic Studies, Odessa branch. Pavel Felgenauer, Correspondent for Novaya Gazeta. And Nicolas Tenzer, Member of Board, CFO, Aspen Institute France.
I will put a particular emphasis in 6 theses in order to understand the New World Order in the light of the 10 last year's event. And in order to do so, I will try to mix some theoretical dimensions that are shaping the prevalent concept, and also very practical issues and recommendations. But I think that we need to talk about concept because, you know, in times of war, and we are in times of war, even sort of Cold War, or not hot war, I don't know what's the good term, you know, really concepts matter. And too often, people are using concepts in order to sell, I would say, propaganda. And the first element is that, first thesis, is that, in my opinion, for the first time in history, universal values are really becoming universal. When we were talking about universal values 30 years ago, 20 years ago, or even in some parts of the world 10 years ago, it sounds rather theoretical. Or it was like Western concept imposed to other areas societies and nations. But nowadays, there is something new. What we are witnessing is that Chinese society, Islamic societies, former communist society or authoritarian societies are becoming able, because of their own legacies, because of their own tradition, not only to understand universal values, but to have a concern, personal concern for liberty, for human rights, and this sort of values. And those societies are not built by, I would say, enlightenment, to say it roughly. But these universal values are coming from Confucius, perhaps for Islam, and the people themselves just learn to have their own consciousness. It's, I think, very important because it means that no culture, no society, no area in the world is doomed to tyranny. All people can be matter for democracy. And this has huge consequences, I think, because the West, which in a sense, of course, originates those values, but is not the owner of those values, must completely change its own mindset, as we will see, especially in supporting democracy in the world, and having more concern with what happens in the very heart of the societies themselves. It means also that no single individual is enshrined for the times to come in an everlasting tradition. And this imposed a will as well to ban two traditional concepts. One is what we used to call culturalism. It means that culture never change. Confidence values are always the same. Ashabiyah in the Islamic world are imposing their own tradition, and so on and so forth. And the second concept that we have to ban is what we call developmentalism, which support the idea that all the societies are moving to the future to different speeds, but finally the same way in order to reach the same goal or the same destiny. In fact, there are different ways to develop for the different societies and different ways to understand probably the same values. The second thesis is that domestic issues must be taken into account in order to manage foreign policy and security affairs. And I think that what happened in the societies could be good value for prediction or forecast. We all know that non-democratic societies have dangerous behavior outside most of the times. We all know as well that economic instability, dependency of oil and gas, which means oil-gas-based economy, very frequently in all parts of the world are not very often democracies. That's something that we can witness. And if we have paid more attention to what happened in Russia 8 years ago or 10 years ago, I think then that we could have understood that all what happened now is completely predictable. Not unpredictable, but predictable. And I remember when 3 years and a half ago, I wrote one of my books, which is The World in 2030. And I was advocating that Russia, of course, is a dangerous power, but that Russia is also a declining power because not only of demography, because of the flow of capital running outside Russia, not because of the sanitary situation of Russia, not only because of this dependency, but also because of human rights situation in Russia. All the people say, well, it's not good prediction, we must be confident on Putin, this man can change, and so on and so forth. And I remember that even 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, I was giving advices to French companies and European companies to be very careful when they go to Russia. To be very careful when investing there. And they say, well, no, Russia, it's a very, big market. I say, well, just take care. There are two reasons from the risk analysis point of view. There is political risk and there is market risks. The third thesis is that we must obviously support democracy everywhere. And that, I think, there must be a specific European way to support democracy. I well know, what, for instance, NED is doing, and all the NGOs under the umbrella of American NED, and Carl Gessman is a very good friend of mine. But I think that there must be not only US way to support democracy, there must be European way as well. And I think also that it's a very important issue because the people of Russia, I mean the democratic people of Russia, the dissidents, cannot accept complacent behavior vis-à-vis Putin. And I know as well that Syrian Democrats cannot accept that we don't take action against Assad. There are 200,000 casualties, people assassinated in Syria from the beginning of the war. And we all know that Putin was supporting what happened there. and that he vetoed all intervention in this part of the world. So Putin is a real danger, not only for European security, not only for its own people, and he is creating the misfortune of its own people, but also for the world order. The fourth element is that we must get rid of the concept of perception. Many people use perception, Russian perception. We must be aware, we must take it into account, we must understand. But what is Russian perception? I think it's merely about Putin's perception, Putin's way of thinking, not people's perception. Perception change, and especially in dictatorships, and you know that when we have polling dictatorships, especially by phone, people don't answer. And I think they're right not to answer because of their own security risk. So perception, I think, is something very careful. Then, fourth thesis, and I will be quick on this. The role of Europe is more crucial than ever to shape the new order. And I think that Europe is not only about economics, not only about investment, not only about financial stability, even if it's very important matters of use, obviously. But I think that Europe is about ideals. And Europe must be stuck in principles and make them know and understand. It means very concretely that we must be able to sanction those who do not respect the rules at home. Of course, I mean Hungary, which is a good case. And we cannot understand that we are so feeble vis-à-vis Hungary. And abroad, it means Russia, of course. The second point about Europe is that Europe must remain open. The door, Europe's doors, must be open to others. It means, even if I know it's very complicated and disputed issue, that we have to accept and make European people accept further enlargement. I think it's something that is very important, because the only way to spread out values and good government principles. And the last element is that we have to protect as well democratic revolution everywhere in the world. All the revolutions are made in the name of European values. It was Orange Revolution, Maidan. It was also the revolution or revolt uprisings in Turkey, or universal values like Arab Spring, even if there are a lot of disillusion, instrumentalization, all these sort of things, in Hong Kong, in Uzbekistan, and many other parts of the world. We don't have the right to disappoint people who put their hopes in Europe and democracies. As a conclusion, I will say just a few things. I think that in the end of the day, I don't know who will win, democracy or tyranny. But we, all of us, if we don't know the end of the story, we must take action accordingly. And I think that's very important. And I think that the European governments, US governments, all democratic governments in the world must give a new sense, a new understanding to history. And I think that's probably the main task, which also has a lot of deal with security matters for the years to come. Thank you.
Oh, yes, very shortly, because we all know, and we know all, say that we cannot
accept annexation of Crimea, disregard for Budapest Memorandum, and so on. But no, there is a question how to take action, because we must. And the people are just waiting for us. When I'm talking for us, it means European countries, Western countries, NATO, and perhaps as well European defense and security policy, you know, even if it's still in Limbus. But this is a real question, because we were talking during last dinner about negotiation with Russia. We were talking about a deal with Russia. What does it mean? What does it mean to negotiate on what? On Crimea? Can we accept a frozen zone in Donetsk region? I cannot imagine that we could negotiate anything with Russia. That's, you know, the main problem. And we all say, well, we must negotiate, we must talk with Russia, we must talk with Putin. What for? So the problem is really that we seem don't have the power to do anything else than negotiate, and negotiate is just a dead end.